Hello, welcome. My name is Peter Holmes. I'm an enterprise account manager here at iGUIDE.
I'm Kyla McEachran. I'm a customer success manager, senior customer success manager here at iGUIDE. And it's lovely to meet you all again. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been back, welcome back. We're excited to go through this session with you today.
So yes, storm season is coming up, and today we're just going to cover like a tiny bit of basic review, but also go into things like real-time tagging, how to go over tricky spaces, and often there's no power at these sites. So what do you do about lighting? And we've got some workflow demos, also including how to, for example, get an instant sketch into Xactimate and the regular standard and premium into Xactimate as well. And Kyle's going to talk about some iGUIDE details, page updates, and then we've got about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. And like we mentioned, if we don't get to your question, feel free to post in the chat and we'll get to it after.
Yeah. Like we said, this is really get ready for storm season. I know everyone's seen the news. It's just the start. Everything's getting ramped up, I guess. Everyone's starting to prepare. And we want to make sure that we're covering both the basics and then some really good information for yourselves before you get out there. So with that said, we wanted to get started with kind of a general overview or a look back at the basics with getting started with iGUIDE. So you can see on the screen here, this is a general iGUIDE that has been created. It's already had some level of restoration started with it. And I'm just going to quickly jump into the actual iGUIDE itself and navigate around through it. So you can see on the far left navigation side over here, this is the tags list that's been created. And then you can see the floor plan with all the points of where scans were taken throughout the property and the tags laid out as well. So what we kind of wanted to go through today is a general overview of how do you actually create this again. I know most of you that are on here have probably created an iGUIDE before, but some people it maybe has been a whole season since you did it, and maybe you need a little bit of a refresher. So with that, we wanted to go into a little bit of best practices for actually getting this kind of output. Because when I look at this is a really well scanned iGUIDE. There's really good coverage. Every room is there. There's lots of scans where you can see multiple things and zoom in on multiple objects within a room. And there's lots of really great tags taken as well that are easily navigated to. So the first and most important thing that I like to stress to everybody with iGUIDE is always remembering the idea of line of sight. So what do we mean by line of sight? What does that mean? That means, can the camera see itself in a previous scan that was taken so that it can auto align those scans together, or really like connect the geometry of what the LiDAR is scanning. So you can see here on the left, this is a really good example of an iGUIDE that has some scans that maybe aren't considered for line of sight. So specifically, if you look at this one scan in the middle here, there's a door in the way for this bedroom, there's a door in the way for this bedroom, and there's a door in the way for this office. So this isn't really a great scan to take because the camera can't see itself if it's going in there, and it's likely to get misaligned. And that either leads to you maybe having to take a second scan or having to manually align it on your phone or afterwards on a desktop. So what we really recommend is something like this scanning practice here. So scanning outside these doors and then scanning inside. My biggest tip and trick I tell everybody when they're going out and they're going to scan, for line of sight, if you keep in mind that you need to scan in every room, but you also need to scan in every entranceway before a room changes into a new room, that's going to really help you maintain line of sight on pretty much every property that you're going to. The other thing I do want to mention that might be new to some of you, especially if you haven't scanned in a little while, is our updated technology we call it SLAM, or Simultaneous Location and Mapping. And what this is actually live LiDAR and a live look at what the LiDAR is seeing and if line of sight is being maintained. So this is available in both the R1. So if you're using the new R1, this is automatically was there from the start. And there's an update with the firmware if you have a Plan X Pro. So if you have questions about that afterwards, please feel free to reach out to us, our support team. We'll be happy to answer how to get that. But I also did want to talk through kind of what it looks like when you're scanning in your app. So if you look on these two GIFs here, you'll see an example of what's going on. So the first one there you can see is a nice green color. And what it's showing is when you take a scan and you start to move the camera to your next scan location, the LiDAR is going to glow in either a green color. And as it gets farther and farther away from that location, it's going to go into more of an orange color, saying, okay, line of sight is kind of still maintained, but it's a little bit farther. And then if you are completely missing line of sight, like what you'll see in that second GIF there, when it goes to the top, then it'll start to show you a red. So this is kind of like a green, yellow, red for like good, okay, stop, for when you're moving with your camera to your next location. So a little bit of visual cues that weren't there before, to try and help people maintain line of sight a little bit better.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyla. All right, so I'm gonna yammer on a little bit about scan placement. Scan placement is critical. You're not always going to be on an independent building like this, but it's still, I think, a good example. These are exterior scans. I recommend in your situations to start in the exterior. It's nice to have exterior. iGUIDE will work outside. But you do want to just double check that LiDAR. Make sure you're not hitting a bunch of bushes on the outside of the building, that you're actually hitting the wall. If you are hitting bushes, feel free to raise that tripod up. The other thing that this is indicating here is the front-facing camera. So each iGUIDE, the iGUIDE Plan X Pro and the R1, where the power button is on both of those cameras is actually the back. And that's important because if you're scanning the exterior of an entire building and you had the power button facing towards the camera, that means your initial view is always going to be facing away from the building, which is not the end of the world. You can always turn that pan around, but it is kind of annoying when you're reviewing it. So just keep that in mind, that what you're facing, like the power button should be facing sort of towards you, and then think about, that way you're taking a photo. That will be your initial view when you open up that panorama. So that's the exterior. The other key to connecting exterior and interior data is right here in the door threshold. So you definitely want to make sure those doors are open during these scans so that this LiDAR data can hit this back wall. And that is really important because these exterior and interior scans are going to be on the same floor. And if there's misalignment between them, like if you only had closed doors here, it won't really know how to connect them. But if you have the doors open and you take a scan in the threshold and then a scan here, then you should have the best chance for proper indoor and outdoor alignment. And then it's just a matter of what you care about. So here it's showing that the camera is facing towards the windows. That's sort of, if the windows and walls, wherever you want to show like the damage as you navigate through. Of course, you can always still panorama around and look at things, but it's just indicating what initial view you're going to be looking at. And at a minimum, 2 scans per room. That will allow you to use measurement modes 3 and be able to reference 2 points of scans and use the photogrammetry tools to be able to take good measurements. Sweet. So that is basically it for scan placement. Just go around in a grid pattern that makes sense for you and sort of end up back where you were, or switch to a new floor as needed. Sweet.
A point I like to stress here as well for grid placement and line of sight. So I talked about earlier, line of sight's the most important thing. It's the biggest thing to remember when you're out scanning. But line of sight doesn't mean you have to do that concurrently every single time. So this grid pattern, for instance, they've gone around through the building. Let's say you forgot a room. You don't need to refollow your grid pattern all the way back to that room. You can just go and place the camera in that room, but just making sure you have a scan previously set that could see that camera. So that's a really good thing to bring up that might save people some time, because sometimes I do see scans where people have done a snake and then they've done the snake back because they forgot something. You don't need to do that. Save yourself some time and some headaches. And to Peter's point about the view of the camera, if you keep that in mind, it's just going to make your tour a little bit easier to navigate. It's a really simple tip and trick that we just like to share with you all. Perfect. Okay, so now some of the stuff that I think is really important to a lot of you. Peter's going to take you through the different types of insurance or ESX files that are available.
Yeah. Nice one. So thanks. So Xactimate is not going to be used on every job every time, but a lot of cases it is. It's, it's got the biggest market share in this restoration sort of world. So we have 3 levels depending on what your needs are. Instant Sketch is good if you just want to kickstart this file process. Instant Sketch does have some limitations. It's AI drafted. So there's no sort of human in the loop here, and they're not reviewing the files. So once, if you need, like this can be delivered in as little as 15 minutes, sometimes even smaller. Sort of depends on how big the file is and also how big our server is at that moment. But, and it does have a pretty good price point at $20 plus 1 cent per square foot. Those are US dollar pricing. With standard iGUIDE, now we're getting into both standard and premium are human drafted iGUIDEs, and they're going to have more detail. We'll start to put in like basic materials, and we'll however not include things like the complex ceilings. Like if there's a slope ceiling, you can see, I think on this one here. There we go. And how do I clear this now? Clear? Yes. Clear all drawings. Nice. Okay, so in that area, you can see it's a slope ceiling. These are all of the same property. And this one, the other thing that premium will have is cabinets. So human drafted cabinets. So iGUIDE premium and standard are, as long as they're under 10,000 square feet, the SLA is to deliver them within 24 hours. I believe that's correct. Yep. If they're bigger than that, it's sort of dependent on how how busy we are and also how big and complex it is. We don't have complexity-based pricing, which is sort of nice for you. But that means that things can take longer. These are human drafted.
I will add a little point about the time frame. So for the instant sketch, like Peter mentioned, it's very quick turnaround. So we say delivered in 15 minutes. Often it's even quicker than that, especially depending on the size of the space you're in. But it's instant. So you're going to get that tour, so that iGUIDE tour I showed earlier, and you're going to get a token to put into Xactimate, which we'll show in 1 second how that all works. With the standard and with the premium, what you'll actually get is when you submit, you will very quickly, in a couple of hours, get the tour. So the iGUIDE tour with a floor plan, just basic floor plan like we showed earlier. And then within that 24-hour time period, you'll get the ESX file. So it'll kind of come concurrently. One comes first, then the other comes right after. And like we said, those are more detailed. There's drafters involved, and they're adding that additional layers of detail. And then you get that ESX file to put into Xactimate. And we'll also walk through how to do that too. So.
Sweet. Thanks. One more note at the bottom here, it's talking about email. This is Rob Bailey at planetar.com to sign up for the Critality Diagram Beta Program. Okay, so that's a lot of words. Basically, Critality, what used to be called CoreLogic, they rebranded, and they have in their claims estimate platform, we now have the ability to create what's called a FML file. It is also automatically generated. It will be on the same sort of level as Instant Sketch, where you can get it back really quickly. There's no human in the loop there. And if you want to get some of those for free, if you want to test this out and be part of that beta program, just email Rob and he can get you included in that. I know CoreLogic's Cotality is not as common, probably 10-15% of the market share in the United States instead of 80 that Verisk and Xactimate have on this segment, but it is growing, and we now have that available. So if some of your customers are looking for or using those diagrams in CoreLogic Cotalities, I don't love the name. It's hard for me to remember, but yeah, if they're interested in that, we're happy to get you on the beta list, and for no cost, we can get you some samples of your own jobs.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. So I did spoiler alert this a little bit, but we did want to show a little bit of how to get that token from the iGUIDE instant into Xactimate. So this is a little bit of a detailed video, but I'll let Peter take us through it here.
So this first part is going to be real familiar. This is just creating a job in Xactimate. So I'm going to, if you have Xactimate, you know how to do that. I'm going to skip ahead to about 41 seconds or so. There we go. Okay, so it's this request data button. That's the key here. So you get an email from us, and then you go to your file in Xactimate, open it up, hit request data. You should be familiar with that if you're using other integrations. And then now it'll look like this. You select iGUIDE as the vendor, and then you add in some details. And you'll hit submit.
Paste into the notes.
And then into the notes, that's where you put the key that we email you. All of this is a little bit of singing and dancing, but that's how Verisk wants us to do it for the instant sketch. For the iGUIDE standard and premium, we just deliver you a drafted ESX file, which has that integration built in, which you see here. And how they got to this, let me back up a little bit. So now once they've clicked, so this is a little bit hidden. So with that instant sketch, let me hit play. You click this little icon here, and that will trigger Verisk software to load in that data that we requested. So a little bit of fiddling. With iGUIDE Premium and Instant, or iGUIDE Premium and Standard, you just get an ESX file and you can open it up and then merge that with your existing one if you've already created one, or build your Xactimate file off that. What it's showing here is an integration tab. So that's actually loading up the iGUIDE into an iframe. And there, if you follow this mouse, they're clicking on that integration tab. So once you bring in this token, that data, it will also bring in the URL for the iGUIDE. And by hitting that integration tab, it will load that up. However, it'll only work if you log in, if the iGUIDE is protected. If the iGUIDE is not protected and unindexed, that means it's not searched by Google, but you can only open it if you have the link. That is an option, but it's often not the default option for insurance. The default option often includes to have the iGUIDE be protected. If that's the case, you're seeing a login screen here, and when you're sharing this with, say, an adjuster or someone else, they're unable to log in. You could consider unprotecting that main default iGUIDE, in which case, once you do that, it will work. If you have any questions about unprotecting iGUIDEs in the insurance world and what that means, and is this going to be on Google, feel free to put it in the chat and we can follow up with an email with details on how that works. In general, as you select insurance, none of these are indexed by Google. So you need the link to view them. Having iGUIDE protection on just means that you have that extra layer, meaning you need to have an iGUIDE account. You need to have permissions to that specific iGUIDE. So it just locks it down even further. So that's a bit of an overview. And yeah, we can head on
Yeah.
to the next slide, I think. Okay, so with standard sketch, you're just loading up an ESX file. On the iGUIDE itself, there will be a downloads page, which has actually changed a little bit, and Kyla's going to show in a second. But you'll be able to download the ESX file in a slightly new spot. And once you do that, you'll open it up into Xactimate online or desktop as you like.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'll just add before we jump into tagging in a second, I'll just add for the download. So every time you submit an iGUIDE, you are going to get an email when both the iGUIDE, so what I mentioned earlier, the actual tour and floor plan are done, and then you will get an email when the ESX file is available. With the instant, that all happens instantaneously or simultaneously, I should say. And with the other two, with the standard and the premium, it kind of comes one after the other. So you'll get the download for the ESX or the token right in those emails, but also in the portal, there is a way that you can download them as well. So you never are lost if you lose your email or if you've deleted something by accident, it's always going to be in the portal too. But it's a good thing to keep in mind that it does come right via email as well. So perfect. Okay, we did want to get into a little bit. So I showed at the very top an iGUIDE with a really, really extensive tag list included. So tagging and real-time tagging is something we really encourage people to do. What it really does is it allows you to annotate and add additional details into an iGUIDE tour. And we showed before where you could see, now you can pull in the tour through an integration right into Exact. And that's really powerful because maybe you want to really call out an area within the tour, or there's something you really wanted to zoom in on and make sure you really see. Or maybe there's like a panel or something that's there and you want to take a zoomed in picture of it because it's got some really key information on it. So you can add all of that directly in the tour. I'm going to play this quick 20-second video here just of one of our iGUIDE pros creating a tag. So it's really, really, really simple. It's right in the app. And what you'll actually see here is when he goes to create the tag, he's using his phone camera to create that actual tag. So when you're using the app, your app is actually going to connect to your phone's camera, your phone's photo library as well. So you can actually in real time use that tagging and take those pictures right there without having to like pick up another camera or get out of the app. It's right there. It's going to connect all together. And one thing you'll actually see here, you won't see him do it in this case, but it's a good point that I did want to bring up right at the end here, is right before he submits, you might notice he added this photo right in here. What you can actually do here, which I think is an underutilized and a little bit of a tip and trick that we're sharing with you guys today, is you can actually hit that camera button again. So he took that photo, he zoomed in, he got that picture. But if you hit that camera button up again, you can actually take another photo and add an additional photo to the tag. So you can take multiple photos in a tag. You can't take them all at once in a snap, snap, snap way, but you can add them either from your photo library or using that camera one after the other. And you just have to do them before you hit next and place them within the tour. So a little bit of a tip and trick that I think is underutilized that is hopefully a bit valuable to some people on today. So I did talk about that. So how to use multiple tags for photo. That's a really good thing to get the candle of. Some other use cases that I want to call out as well. So usually I see it zoomed in on a specific area to kind of get more like really zoomed in close up images. Sometimes if people are taking additional videos or images while they're walking through a site, they'll add them in as tags. So this could be like additional damage. Maybe there's something outside that you don't actually want to follow line of sight and tag, but you really want to show. You can put that in there as a tag as well. If you're in more of the restoration space, I see this used a lot to show when you came on site, exactly what it looked like. And maybe once you've done some work, once you've, put in some equipment where you've placed it, you can like really see that in the tour then for later on, and where you've put it there. So then from your office or from an offsite, you can visualize exactly what's there. So there's lots of use cases for it. We always like to call out a couple, but honestly, you can get very creative with this. You can add videos in post. It's really hard to add those in real time, but you can add a lot of things in post as well, hyperlinks, everything. So it's really customizable to your use case, and you can get quite creative with it to just add more information all in one place. And then Peter is going to take us through a little bit of viewing and sharing tags because, again, I think there's some tips and tricks here that people maybe don't know about. So we want to teach you guys a little bit more about it too.
Sweet. Thanks, Kyla. Yeah, I love tags. There's so much that can be done with tags, and I think that they're really, really useful. Like Kyla was saying, you can take photos of up close to get extra detail, which I'll show you in a second. But also you can take photos of contracts. So if you're a restoration contractor and so you need a sign off from somebody, you don't want to lose that, you don't in the truck, just while you're on site, take a photo of it, tag it in the iGUIDE, then you know it's saved. And then when you bring it to Xactimate later, it'll be there. So all the tagged images show up as photos in the photo tab. So if there's a whole bunch, they can show up in there. And one of the things that I actually only found out about a month ago after I've been here like a whole year is it looks like that's as big as you can get this photo. Is like from here, if there was some text, it would be there too. But if you click this little triangle on the top right, that doesn't, I want to be able to read this. Say this was, it's not an electrical panel, but let's pretend it was. I want to read the make and model of this, or if it was an HVAC system or something. So the trick then is to right click on it and say open image in new tab. That will open it up here. And then I can switch to this tab. And that's a much bigger already, but then I can even zoom in further and really see a ton of detail. So that is the way to really utilize the best of tags, because this will be basically the full resolution that we got from your camera. And that is really, really useful. You can download it from here. You could also download it from the image gallery, which would happen all at once and be a little easier. But if you just wanted one image, just feel free to hit save image as and do that. The other thing that you can do is if you want to share this with somebody, this particular tag, you can actually hit that copy icon there, and that's copied a link directly to this iGUIDE, directly to this tag. So if I open up a new tab, and then anybody opening that, as long as it's unprotected and they have access to log in, they'll be able to open this up and see it. So they can link that right there. The other thing that's new with tags is it used to be kind of non-obvious. If typically when you open up an iGUIDE, it will sort of look like this and not have any tags on it. This one does because it has this URL. There we go. So typically it'll look like this. And it's not obvious if this iGUIDE has tags or not. So then you have to know to click this tag button down here, and then the viewer can view them all. However, now we've created this new sharing option. It's called Show Tag List. So that will always result in this view being open. So if you're sharing this with somebody like another contractor or subcontractor or something, you want them to see the tags and they're not that as familiar with iGUIDE, definitely share it with them this way. That way, when they open it up, the tag list will be already open. Nice.
Brilliant. Yeah, there's lots of tips and tricks with tags. Like I said, it's really powerful and you can kind of make it what you want. These are some use cases we've seen used, but you have a lot of free will with it as well. Okay, so we did want to briefly go over, obviously we've been showing you an iGUIDE in a nice space that's already had some restoration, but I know for some people, especially during storm season, they're going out into some tricky spaces that maybe don't have, flat floors, have a lot of debris, have a lot of stuff going on. I know I saw some last year with, sand several feet above me at 5 foot. And then I also saw a lot of equipment thrown around, and how do you actually get that space captured is kind of, I think, a question that comes up a lot. So we talked about line of sight. What we try and say is if you're in a space like this and you've got your tripod, we do recommend you have a tripod that has legs, like individual legs that can be moved so that you can try and level it as much as possible. iGUIDE is pretty forgiving. The R1 and the Plan X Pro are very, very forgiving for leveling. But if there is a lot of level up and down, you do risk getting some alignment errors and it might slow you down a little bit. So do recommend trying to level it as best as possible as you're moving throughout the property. You can raise the lidar up a little bit or a little bit down based on debris around. So we talked about earlier as well, I think Peter mentioned this really well, is that the lidar is going out on a plane and he talked about, if it's hitting bushes, that's what the lidar is hitting, that's what it's measuring. You do want to try and hit that lidar, so that middle part of the camera where it's level, where it's hitting as much of the walls as possible or much of the structure as possible. Obviously, that's going to be more difficult with debris or whatever is lying around. So, do you recommend just finding spots in the room or taking a couple scans per room just so that it can hit that and create that structure really nicely for you? So those are kind of the two tips and tricks I would say with the heavily debris rooms. How do you line it up? Like we said before, that back of the camera is just going to do the view when you come into the tour. So the alignment of the tour, if I open it and the camera was facing this way, that's the way I'm going to see it when I open the tour. The other thing, and the most common question I get all the time is, does it work in low light? Does it work outside? It does work pretty well in low light conditions, but if you are in, a spot where there's zero visibility, zero light, is gonna face some challenges. We do have a series of accessories on our page that are just recommended accessories that people have used before and had really good luck with. So these halo lights are some of them for low light situations or spaces. So that this gets used a lot. I've also just seen people use their phone cameras, to be honest. You can use, not your phone cameras, your phone flashlight, to be honest. You can use that. And if you put it under the iGUIDE, under the camera, that also works pretty well as well. Like we said before, this can be done outside. The lidar does work outside. Do recommend you still have to like hit a wall, but you can go pretty far. I think it goes 130 feet. That's how far the lidar goes, but it's going to be less dense the farther out it gets. So just keep that all in mind as you're going out. But a little bit of tips and tricks for those trickier spaces that you're probably going to come across. Okay. Final thing that we wanted to take you guys through today. So we kind of teased this a little bit earlier. And if you've signed into the portal recently, you've probably seen these changes. They're very, very new, just went live last week. But first thing, what you'll see is that the details page. So when you sign into an iGUIDE, it's going to look a little bit different in general. So it, instead of all the views, if you had duplicate views being at the bottom, it's all going to be kind of nice in the top of the page there. So right here in this top of page is where you're going to see what it looks like. That looks a little different. The second thing is that if you do create default views, so I see this done a lot. I see it done a lot in like restoration, sometimes in our architecture side as well. So some of you might have never done this before, but you can create what we call duplicate views. So let's say you get an iGUIDE drafted, it's the full building. You can create a duplicate exactly as it is in that moment. So there's a little duplicate button there and it'll duplicate exactly as it appears. But what you can actually do with duplicates, and what I see people do, is sometimes they will hide certain rooms that they don't want to share with maybe a third party. So for example, I see this sometimes when they're sharing with a third party contractor and the contractor's only working on the bathroom. They don't really want to share the rest of the building with them. They don't need them to go through and see all the other damages. They just need them to quote on this specific space. You can do that with our duplicate views. And we've changed the view of where you can find the duplicate views now. So if you see the number 2 on this screen, that is now where you would find the duplicate views. It's a drop-down menu that you would be able to see all your different duplicates labeled and named the same as they were before, but just in a bit of a different spot. And finally, the third point and the most exciting point, and Peter teased this a little bit earlier as well, is we've tried to make it a little bit easier for you to find your files after you've created them. So previously, if you wanted to find your ESX files, if you've ever worked in the architecture space and you've gotten some of those CAD files, you had to go on that left navigation pane over on the side over here, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and then you would see your files. We have changed that up a little bit and tried to make that easier to navigate. And now all those important files are going to be right here on the details page. So you'll have those linked to the tours. You will have the links to the photospheres and the assets. The assets are the raw photos. And then you'll also have links to floor plans. And then any other downloads or deliverables you got, in this case, probably ESX files, they will see them here. If that file isn't ready yet, because if you think back to the very beginning when I mentioned that you first get delivered the tour and then you get the ESX file afterwards, if that is still being worked on, you'll actually see the pending right here as well. So if you're ever wondering, oh, is that done yet? I don't know. I don't remember if I got an email. It's really quick. It's just one quick sign in, hitting that details. You'll see it right away, whether it's completed or whether it's still in the pending stage too.
Nice one. Yeah. Thanks, Kyla. So yeah, some updates to where you find files on the details page. Nice. All right. So just to recap the deliverables for Instant Sketch come back really quickly, but they're AI drafted. So if you just really need like the basics to get going, or maybe you just want to do your own thing in Xactimate, or it's a really simple space, Instant Sketch could work well. If it's more complex space and it's more complex loss, you want some more work. Your own estimating team is busy with lots of other jobs, especially with storm season. We can help you, kickstart this process. So that's really what Standard and Premium are really good at, taking that brick out of your basket and allowing your estimators to focus on what they do best instead of tediously, using the overlay feature and drawing out these things and manually doing a lot of this work. We can help you with that. And so those are really good options, both Standard and Premium. Probably Premium is our most commonly used of all of these three options, and that's because it includes things like cabinets, which are critical for getting good estimates in Xactimate. The one thing not on here is, again, I'll just mention it. If you do ever use CoreLogic or your customers use that Totality claims estimating tool, sign up for that free beta program. We'd be happy to get your feedback on those.
And with that, I think we've come to the end of our presentation. I do see that the chat is a bit active, so we might have some time for some quick questions. If there's some really detailed ones, we will make sure that we follow up with them. But I'm just going to have a quick look in here and see if there's anything that we can quickly answer. I thought protected means you can't share it with the insurance carrier. That is a great question, Kevin. So what protected mode means is that the iGUIDE is essentially locked down to a login, and that requires an email added on to the iGUIDE in order for them to view it. And then that person does have to sign in and then see the iGUIDE. So what we see, and this is probably what you've been advised on this one, is a lot of the insurance carriers don't want to log in, or you have to create email logins for multiple people, and that's a little bit of a challenge. So instead of those cases, most people don't protect those iGUIDEs. They keep them available and visible, and then they just share that link as needed. Some people do want that extra layer of protection. Maybe it's really sensitive data. Maybe there's something really confidential that they don't want to share. So we kind of have those two options. That first option where you can share it and it's really, really limited by that email, or where you can share it and it's really limited by who has the link. But just keep in mind, when it's unprotected, who has the link can see it. But there is ways afterwards for you to lock it down if you're done with that view, or you don't want people to be viewing it anymore.
If we use the Instant Sketch and import the data, will this prevent us from sharing the protected data when we mark the Xactimate file as complete and send it to the carrier? Yeah, so if it is protected, you won't when we mark the Xactimate, so it won't have any problems with the Xactimate file. The Xactimate file will still contain the sketch. The only thing that may not work for the carrier is if they hit that integrations tab, which not everybody does or knows that it's available. They won't be able to see the iGUIDE in sort of these two views. So if you want your carrier to see not just the sketch file in the Xactimate, that will totally work. But if you want them to see the full 3D tour as well, that will not work. There are other ways around that. You can create a duplicate view and unprotect that one, and then share that separately, that link separately in an email to the carrier. That's totally an option. You can put that as a note in Xactimate. Here's if you want to see the 3D tour. Here's a link. But it would need to be an unprotected one. Keep in mind, unprotected does not mean out there unsearchable by Google. Everything done on the insurance, when you select insurance, which should all be your defaults, that is automatically unindexed, so not available for searching on Google.
Perfect. Into my I want to know more about how to integrate the iGUIDE 3D tour into my Xactimate. So what we'll do actually after this call is we will send, there's another video we have that has a really quick view of how to do that. It's really, really simple. So once you have it in, the integration should be available, but we'll send some follow-up on how to do that so everybody can see that.
Yeah, the key there though is that the Xactimate file is drafted by a human drafting team, and it's created into an actual file. So that file is now like a Polaroid. It's a snapshot in time, and we can't then update it remotely. So that means that that link is always going to be the default link. So if you create a duplicate iGUIDE and then say that one is unprotected, unfortunately, that doesn't change what was already created in the Xactimate file. So if you do want it to be available for these carriers, I just recommend that you go to your default settings and you turn off protection mode, and then make sure that insurance is your standard default for the industry type. And that way they'll be unindexed, and only people with the link will be able to see them. And then you'll be able to share them and let your carriers or maybe third-party estimating companies know that they can view that inside the Xactimate estimate. They'll always be able to open it up into a new tab, outside of that as well. If for some reason you weren't able to unprotect that default iGUIDE.
I jumped over a couple there. This presentation will be recorded and sent out, so don't worry about that. We will send that out to everybody. But I jumped on this one that I think is another good one. Will the LiDAR function correctly if the drywall is removed from the walls and before the property is inspected, all the studs are exposed? Yes, it'll still work in those cases. The iGUIDE standards and the iGUIDE premiums, especially, they're being drafted by drafters. The iGUIDE instant, it'll still work in those instances. You probably just won't have any named areas within the scan, or sorry, within the floor plan. Like it might not say, oh, this is a kitchen, this is that. Whereas our drafters might use other context cues in order to draft that and label the rooms accordingly. But yes, the LiDAR will still work, and it will still create that structure within the building. We got another one about the recordings. Capture the studs without. Yeah, perfect. Someone else got in there. Use. This one we can probably follow up on a little bit more, but with the premium, does it automatically measure and provide cabinet and countertop measurements, or do we have to use the measurement tool? I found the measurement tools difficult. So I guess I can leave that with you. Yeah.
Automatically is the tricky word there. So it's actually done by a human on our team. So yes, they have measurement mode tools that you have, but also some additional tools for them, for the draft team to be able to do this a little more efficiently. And yeah, I mean, you don't need to measure the cabinets if you're doing that. So
yes,
that's good. If you're interested in the full deliverables document, there's I think a 10 to 12 page document on what's included in the Premium ESX, if you message the host with your email address, we can send that out to you and you can see what's sort of available. Of course, we can only scan what we see though. So if you're not giving us good data, we don't have enough scans, the cabinet measurements are not going to be as accurate as if you gave us lots of scans and lots of good data to work with. So we'll do our best, but ultimately we're not on site with a measuring tape. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And if you do need help with the measurement tools ever as well, we do have some resources on that. But some of that is as well, we were talking about some of those tips and tricks earlier. Some of the ways you scan can really help make those measurement tools a little bit more effective. So if you're ever curious, please feel free to reach out to our support team and we'll be happy to help you out there as well.
And if you want a sample ESX Premium, I believe we can share a link to the showcase page.
Yep.
Where you can download and open that up in Xactimate yourself and have a look around.
Yeah, I think we can provide that after this call. We can share with you our showcase page, which has some samples that some of you might not have seen before. So a little bit of a treat. Let's see if we can find one more quick one here. Oh, this is a good question. I get this come up quite a bit. How big are the files stored on your mobile device? How long are the files stored on the mobile device? And what happens to the iGUIDE portal after 3 weeks? So the files if you're using the R1, the files are stored on your device. So it's hard to say how big the files are because it varies depending on the size of the property. If you're scanning an 80,000 or an 80,000 square foot university, it's going to be a lot bigger than, your standard family home. What I will say is I have worked with a lot of people who have scanned those big properties and they haven't had any issues with storage on their devices throughout that scanning. In terms of how long it stays on your device, it's going to be in your app and you can delete them as you go, but they're not going to be deleted automatically. So I do advise after a little bit of time to probably go through your files and see where you can remove them. I do advise to make sure that you have uploaded them first before deleting them, or making sure that you've either saved the raw data on another device as well. So we do have some ways that you can transfer that raw data, that tar file, to your computer or your desktop. How long so it doesn't get disappear automatically. I will give a little bit of a caveat there with the Planix Pro. That is on your USB. So however big your USB is, that's how big and that's how much storage you have. So there's a little bit of a difference there between those two. And then I'm not entirely sure what you mean. What happens to the iGUIDE portal after the 3 weeks? That might be something we'll follow up on.
Yeah, it stays there.
Yeah.
as long as you want. By default, after 1 year, it will expire, but you can simply go in and unexpire that. It's just a quick setting change. You can even, as soon as you get it back, you could set the expiration date out for 10 years if you wanted to. My entire time being here, we don't automatically delete data. That's one of the nice things about iGUIDE is that you guys have access to it. You can even download an offline iGUIDE, which is an option. You can keep that on your own hard drive forever for free. No, it's just that offline iGUIDE is actually useful in the insurance restoration space too, because sometimes if this information actually does go to a court of law, you'll probably need to do discovery, and the iGUIDE can be included in that on a USB drive. So it doesn't need to be connected to the internet or anything. So we'll send out some information on how to download an offline iGUIDE, and you can have that forever, so you can feel confident that as long as you have that, you'll be able to open the tour on any browser, just like you would, even if you're not connected to any internet, which is awesome. Say I've probably taken the iGUIDE and photos. How do I obtain the countertop and cabinet measurements? So if you request that iGUIDE premium sketch, then they'll be included in the Xactimate file. So when you open that Xactimate file up, you'll be able to navigate through that file in 3D. I don't have Xactimate on my computer or a ton of knowledge in Xactimate, but there are a ton of resources available on how to open up measurements in Xactimate, and you'll just simply be able to view them within Xactimate, and you could even apply macros to them or do your own thing after the fact. If you want, if you're need to get millimeter accuracy for some reason with Xactimate, what I would recommend is using a LiDAR distance measuring tool on site while you're there, and then tagging a photo of that. So two photos really, one where you can see where the LiDAR is going and one where you can see what the measurement is. That way, when you get the premium sketch back, you can double check and verify. And then, because we're using visual data combined with one slice of a LiDAR, so there's some margin for error there. So what I would say is don't go ordering any cabinets based on these measurements. But for estimating purposes on rebuild, and which is what we're talking about here in the restoration world, it's pretty good. Right. Cheers, Kevin.
Awesome. Okay, I think we've gotten through most of it. Oh, I've got this one line here. I've heard doing vertical scans in rooms. Can you explain how that works? We did skip over that today because we didn't want to go too much into details with vertical scans and confuse everybody. What I will say is vertical scans are when you turn the camera on its side. So we were just talking about a plane of LiDAR. If you look at the camera that you used in the past, you would see, up top, there's the lens at the top, there's the LiDAR in the middle. What people do now and what we have for some of our deliverables is we require vertical scans. So if you turn the camera on its side, now the LiDAR is going like this versus before it was going like this. Where this is mostly used is for some of our 3D modeling, kind of more in the Revit space is where it's like required. Sometimes this does give our drafters some additional information and then some additional measurements. So if there's like a very complex ceiling or there's like a lot of details that you really need to capture, you could take a vertical scan and essentially take a slice of that information. We do recommend if you're taking a vertical scan to put it on its own unique floor. So that way it doesn't jumble in and get misaligned with the rest of the horizontal scans. But it's really about the data and capturing that vertical data versus that horizontal plane of data with the LiDAR capture. So I see Maya provided a little bit more info in the chat. But yeah, if you do want to learn more about that, please reach out to us. We've got lots of information. It's not necessary for most of these like storm projects, but there might be a situation where you need it one day, and we're happy to help with that as well.
Yeah. Shortly, the keys to being successful with vertical scans are setting them up on a new floor. So you don't ever want to combine vertical scans and horizontal scans. The alignment, of course, is going to be terrible, and it'll just make your data look sort of ugly. So add it to a new floor, call it something specific like vertical scan of west stairway, something like that. Take a scan at the bottom, at the top, and then just those two scans are on that floor, nothing else. So when you're doing verticals, just always be thinking, how do I add this to a new floor? And then you'll be much more successful. But it's also not required for anything to do with Xactimate. I think if you can include that data, and the drafters will be able to see it if it's added to a second floor, and they can take that into account, but it's not required for any of those deliverables. If you wanted 3D CAD, like in Revit, or 3D DWG, then it is required, and we do need some of those scans, and that's how we're able to take this relatively inexpensive sort of field scanning tool and create 3D, really accurate 3D sort of scans with it. So that's pretty awesome. Otherwise, you're using, a very expensive like Leica device and capturing 8,000 points of data for every scan, and your files are 10 gigabytes, and not very many people can use that data. So this is a great option for you.
Okay.
We did it.